Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Hall. I'm Executive Director here at Montclair Film. Thank you for joining me back here for our Q&A for Crip Camp for our virtual opening night for the 2020 Montclair Film Festival. I'm here with the directors, Jim LeBrecht and Nicole Newnham. Thank you guys for making time to be with us.
Happy to be here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really happy to be here.
Thank you. So I want to start to talk about the relationship that you two have with one another. I know a lot of co-directors, and it's a fraught and beautiful collaborative process often. How did you two meet and come together to tell this story?
Well, Jim and I have known each other for over 15 years now. And Jim has been the sound designer and mixer on my 3 previous feature documentaries. And we had a really great time working together. And over time, we started talking more and more about disability because Jim was becoming kind of an increasingly powerful voice as an advocate within our industry for people with disabilities, and also around kind of the lack of representation for people with disabilities. And at a certain point, I got lucky enough that he took me out to lunch and pitched me a few ideas, sort of with the idea that I might direct a film out of ideas that were things that he wanted to see around disability, and he might co-produce with me. And then, kind of as a throwaway at the end of the lunch, he told me, well, you know what I've really always wanted to see is a film about my summer camp. And I'm really grateful that I asked him why, even though maybe inside I was rolling my eyes a little bit, because I think everyone thinks their summer camps were really special, but not everyone needs to make a documentary about their summer camp. But when he started describing Jened and this idea of this powerful community site of liberation for himself and all these teenagers, I just completely fell in love with the idea. And I thought that the power of it would be co-directing with Jim and telling the film through Jim's voice and through his unique perspective.
Jim, did you have other things to add about the collaborative process?
No, but I think it's not every day that you are a co-director and also a subject in the film. And that this was a community that I know well because of having been born with spina bifida. But so it wasn't only just crafting the film itself, but it was really crafting the way that we were going to work together and what our pluses, what our strengths were, and it all just kind of found this natural kind of not metamorphosis. Anyway, it found its right balance, and it was great because there were times that I needed really to be the subject. Nicole would interview me in the editing room when we wanted to try to create some voiceover. And so and there were some incredible people along the way that Nicole knew that I didn't know that came on board that were just the right ingredients to have really made this film so we now have the pleasure of the wonderful success that we're seeing, but it is beyond just how you edit a film.
Absolutely. And can you guys talk about how, this film is both contemporary and it's Jim and Judy and others that are in the film looking back on their experiences, but there's so much amazing archival footage in this movie. And I know being able to source that material, go through what I'm sure is an incredible amount of original archival material, and then cobble that together into a story can be a very long process. Can you talk a little bit about your process for obtaining the footage, working it out, and then putting it together in the editing room to tell this story?
Yeah, well, when we first started talking about the project, Jim told me that he remembered that this Radical Video Coalition had visited the camp and that they had handed him the camera, this very early Portapak video camera, and strapped the Portapak on the back of his chair, and he filmed a tour of the camp. And I was like, what? How amazing would that be? Because at that point in time, there was not that much footage that we knew was available. There were a lot of still photographs, but we were talking about things like having young actors with disabilities recreate scenes and things like that. And so I put in a ton of man hours online at night trying to figure out what was the name of this video coalition so that we could try to track them down. And eventually, after many months, we found one of the members of the People's Video Theater, Howard Gutstadt, was listed as being on the board of a radical bookstore in San Francisco, and we left him a note. And a month later, he emailed us and he said he had 5.5 hours of this incredible footage. And somehow it had survived 17 moves in 17 different basements. And they were midway through digitizing it all. And so it was actually many months into our journey of working together that we got this magical hard drive delivered to our, edit room in Berkeley, and just sat down and like literally watched it all the way through, all 5.5 hours. And, we looked at each other halfway through and said, like, I could just watch and watch and watch this. Like, I could probably watch it for 10 hours because there's something so magical and just real about the way time flows. You really feel like you're at the camp experiencing the process of the community coming together while you're watching the footage. And of course, like, my experience watching it was nothing like Jim's, having been a part of it.
Yeah,
It was really like looking through some kind of, telescope back in time.
How did that make you feel? Because I know, like, I have a hard time looking at like childhood pictures of myself, let alone videotapes of my teen years, which are always, pretty intense for people as they grow and change and develop. How was that for you as an experience to see that that time again?
Well, Camp Jened was this place really kind of like how we tried to describe in the film, this real bubble of freedom. And where I met a lot of people that were so important for my early years of my life. And so it reminded me of this time and place that I've held a really romanticizing feeling about, just because, heck, I was 15, my first girlfriend, all these hippies, and the possibility of, being able to smoke dope with my counselors, which I was an average,
Sure.
But that is really much more emblematic of just freedom.
Yeah.
And so the place did have an incredible impact upon myself and other people, and really set my trajectory. But there were people who are no longer alive that I felt like I was going back to visit.
Yeah.
And I really didn't want to leave the camp when we were done editing the film.
You mentioned the sort of the freedom, and the film, I think, does a really great job of setting an expectation that freedom, of course, did not exist outside of the camp itself, and that the mission of the group became this transformative mission to maybe recreate conditions in the outside world that humanized the disabled community in the eyes of the country from a very practical level. And I'm wondering, what do you think it was about the camp, the relationships that you built there with one another, that led you all down this, not everyone, but a large group of people down this sort of revolutionary path that transformed American society? Because, summer camp doesn't always mean that to people. And, at the time didn't mean that to people in the 60s. It didn't always come out that way, the 60s and the 70s, and so to see you guys take it by the horns and sort of change the country was very, very interesting to me. And I'm just curious if you have thought back on what the factors were that may have led you guys to come together that way and take it on the road.
The factor was Judy Heumann.
Yeah.
That was so much of it. I mean, we can certainly talk about the revolutionary time it was of the women's rights movement and Black Power and such, and it was a great time of social change. But meeting Judy told me that there were dynamic people with disabilities out there, and that we actually had this ability to push back and prevail. And that was a new concept to me. So
I walked out of the movie ready to vote for her for president.
Yeah, people want statues and stamps right now, is also what we're hearing.
You know, one of the first phone calls we made when we started talking about the project was to Judy, and we asked her, you know, do you think that the camp was a spark for the movement that came? Because that was a theory that Jim had, and once I got like all fired up about it and wanted to write treatments about that and stuff, Jim was like, well, hold on, like let's make sure that it's not just my opinion, but that, like, broadly speaking, you know, academics and people like Judy agree, you know, that this camp was this kind of revolutionary launching pad for the movement. And she said yes, and I remember the words she used were really beautiful. She said Jened was a place where we came together to go apart, you know? And she talked about that, kind of those conversations that were, you know, so transformational for people, because they were making people realize the commonality of that they shared was structural oppression, and they could see by coming together that oppression, and then, you know, knew what to fight, but also, as Jim says in the film, like knew what to fight for, you know, knew that a better world where people could be treated equitably was possible. So that was really exciting for us as filmmakers to try to be able to show kind of magically as it grew across time, because you don't usually get the, you know, sort of organic, real grassroots kind of just popping up of a social movement. You don't normally get that captured on film. And literally the People's Video Theater stumbled into the camp on pretty much accident, because they ran across some campers at a gas station. And that's one of my favorite things about documentary film, you know, is those kinds of amazing coincidences that years later you realize something captured that way can be shown to be as important as it actually was.
Nicole, one of the things that I felt walking out of this film was, first of all, ashamed and angry that I didn't know this history already, that this country had not told this story, celebrated this in any real way, aside from, you know, the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it's sort of been not a story that's been told. And then I started, you know, questioning my own baggage around disability and disabled rights. And I'm wondering what you brought as a director when you started dealing with this material. How were you changed by the story that you were telling? And what sort of transformation did you undergo? I just felt like this is something that really changed me as a person watching it. Not that I was coming from a place of like condescension or, you know, I just didn't know the story, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it walking in the door. And I walked out like ready to vote for Judy for president, and, you know, completely changed as a person. So I'm wondering about, it must've been a big process for you as a filmmaker.
Yeah, it was a very similar process, I think, not only for me, but for our incredible team of editors, you know, who worked on the film with us, for our executive producers. You know, it was an intense role for Jim to play, to be, you know, the person who like had the intimate, personal, lived experience of the story, but also like was kind of our true north, you know, as far as this is the lived experience of disability, and these are the really important themes we need to get across. But for us, I think what we tried to do was really let the material speak to us, and we were mindful of those transitions that we were going through as people, you know. So the first time I watched that scene of the message to parents table, you know, feeling really uncomfortable with Nancy Rosenblum trying to speak, and how long I had to sit there and listen to her talk and not understand her, and how bad I felt about myself for not understanding her, and all of that. But then how amazing it felt when Steve translated and I understood what she was saying, and noticing how respectful everyone was. You know, I went through all of that myself. And so I think what we tried to do is really look at the footage that way. Like, what are the moments in the camp that are causing us to have those that kind of profound, like, immersive experience of like confronting your own bias, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think we played a role of kind of, you know, architecting some of that. And then, you know, the perspective that Jim brought was so powerful, because things like the hierarchy of disability, you know, all of these things that like we didn't even know existed. And so it was like kind of like trying to use our combined perspectives to flesh out a world, so that for people, audiences who, you know, were disabled, and audiences were non-disabled, were we're both going to be having like a profound experience, in one case of learning something new, and in the other case of seeing like a full portrait in a way that hadn't really been seen quite like that on film before.
Jim, is that frustrating for you, that the idea that you had to tell the story and have it be, you know, that everyone's coming to it and saying, oh, I wasn't prepared, or I didn't know this story, and I'm changed by it. And I can imagine thinking, well, where have you been? You know what I mean? Like, is that a frustration, or how do you feel about the reaction to the film?
I think that perhaps our prime goal with the film was to try to reframe how people thought about disability. Not only people who are not disabled themselves, but also people who are living with disabilities, hidden disabilities, chronic illness. That, and I think that from what we sense in the world, that our film does really change people's attitudes about folks with disability. And we're all hearing on social media from disabled people who say, look, this has really been meaningful to me. And I remember during the editing process, I came into the editing room late in the morning once, and Nicole and our editor, Andy Gersh, played back something to me. And I thought, wow, maybe people will finally understand.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't bother me if people don't know this history. You know, we haven't been on people's radar about anything beyond usually negative things. And I'm just thrilled that people love the film and that this history is there, that we know that that there'll be more teaching opportunities of this history through our impact campaign and people simply just showing the film. So I'm very focused on the future and how meaningful it is to be alive right now with our film.
And you know, speaking of the future, how far have things come? Do you think in this country? I know there's still the fact that we're still transforming people with the film tells me that, you know, we still have a ways to go as a society. But I'm wondering, like, what has happened in the time since sort of the narrative of the film has ended? Have people stayed in touch? Are we still fighting together for justice? Where is the campaign for disabled justice and rights?
I could answer that over the course of a couple of hours, probably. I think what has changed, what hasn't changed, is the need for society to really look upon disabled people as not something that they are either disposable or have nothing to offer, but that in fact we are a collection of group of people very wise with our own culture and with a great deal to offer if you would only get over yourself. But I think the other thing that we've seen, especially in working on the film and working on in our plans for a very, very strong impact campaign with the film, is really looking to the next generation of activists. And that we are working with, we have two people running our impact campaign that come from the disability justice movement. And a lot of people don't know that there's a difference, or what do you mean by that? Isn't that the same as disability rights? But one, and maybe Nicole, you can help me distill this down to a fairly short definition, but it's really looking at disability rights through a lens that is not white, that is not straight, that is really marginalized people within the community. And that their voices and their participation in history and what is happening today is not being heard or seen. And that as you know more about this group of people and this part of my community and incredible work, it's as an exciting story as the film itself.
Yeah, we recognize that this is, you know, as you said, I mean, to be honest, it does anger me a bit, the way that this story has been neglected by history. You know, we're meeting people all the time who maybe lived a mile away from the building where that sit-in took place at the time and didn't know it happened. You know, people who lived around the corner from the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley who didn't know it happened. So that is unfortunate, but I think the what we've ended up with is because there's so few stories out of disability history that have kind of broken through to common knowledge. This film is being seen as the only one, and we are really trying to push against that with our impact campaign to elevate the voices of the next generation. And Jim has been doing like incredible advocacy work within the film industry everywhere he goes to try to make sure that a path is paved for other filmmakers with disabilities to come after, so that many, many, many stories can be told. And also, we hope our film is fun and entertaining and like shows people that there's a market for these films and how great they can be.
And so if you do have an impact campaign, how can our audience get involved or do some good having seen the film? I think your urge is to go and help and do something. Are there things that our audience can do to support the continuing struggle?
Yes, we're going to be launching actually really soon an emergency fund for disabled activists and artists and who have been impacted by the pandemic. And people can find out information about that, information about educational curriculum, hosting their own screenings and having conversations, and also kind of get themselves on a list to stay in touch with our campaign, which has incredible virtual events planned now for the next few months, including a virtual Crip Camp experience, which is lectures and kind of capacity building sessions being taught by cutting edge activists from the community. And all of that can be accessible by going to cripcamp.com, and signing up.
Great. So yeah, I wonder about that because like one of the great things about Gen Ed was the counselors were not at all equipped to foster that type of thing. I thought that was really, really great. As a summer camp kid myself, I was like, oh, so jealous of the relationship that you guys had. It was pretty great. Well, I just want to say thank you guys again for taking the time to be with us tonight as we, virtually get together and talk about this incredible movie. We're really, really proud to be able to share it with our audience and have you guys with us. So thank you for doing it. Great luck this year with the film as you continue to roll it out. Are there any other sort of thoughts on the future? I know you're on Netflix already, and who knows what's going to happen with award season and all that stuff, but do you have other plans for the film?
I mean, we have some events that we're trying to do virtually around the 30th anniversary of the ADA. That's in late July of this year. And certainly we're going to try to keep this fire lit as strongly and as brightly as possible. And that, to really kind of, so more to come, but go to www.cripcamp.com.
Perfect timing, whoever's calling me. Thank you guys.
There's somebody calling now.
I don't know what that is. Sorry. My son's birthday, so my entire family's been like calling all day.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's a pleasure to meet you. Best of luck on the campaign with this film, and we'll do what we can to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.